Good afternoon, all. If we could just collect together. So, I'd like to introduce the people on the panel. We have Russell from KPMG, Ferran from PwC, Bettina from the FSA, and Steve Quayle from Capital International. Now, certainly the people around the room have done these things before. Many of us you'll have seen before around the industry. But there's one new person. So Bettina has taken over the role of CEO of the FSA, so is a newcomer to the island. I hope we can extend a very warm Isle of Man welcome to her in that new and what may be challenging role. Okay, so let's make a start. We're at a digital conference here, and the subject we've got is financial services. Now, we certainly don't want to set the world to rights on all of financial services. So what we'd like to do here is really concentrate on the element that has been talked about in other parts of the sessions today, which is fintech. So the technical parts of financial services. So we're going to kind of run through some of the elements of that in the talk today, its own challenges within the Isle of Man and how we might combat them. So if I can just give a slight preamble there. 2009 was a kind of seminal year. Lots of things happened in 2009. And because of those, it became almost the birth year of what is modern fintech. Now, the things that happened, financial crash, actually led to kind of diversification at a regulatory level. So we looked at things like challenger banks, and the use of the word challenger is very interesting. But it was also around the birth of crypto. So crypto kind of came in at this cryptocurrency and threw many spanners in the works. But a number of other elements is there was a change of trust. Millennials want applications. There was a need for greater diversity because of too much happening in one place. So there became this opportunity with financial technology becoming cheaper, or technology overall becoming cheaper, for things to diversify, for new things to happen. And that is the birth of modern fintech. So if we talk about that diversification, first question I'm going to pass over to Russell at my side here is, do you really agree that the fintech has taken financial services and created a greater degree of diversification?
Thanks, Kurt. Yes, I do think it has, and I think it's important to just step back to what I think Steve Billinghurst was saying earlier, looking at that spectrum of something completely new and changes the way we interact with financial services. And you know, we talk about the sort of change in trust from the financial crisis and made financial services become much more something you do rather than somewhere you go. And when you look at not so much the trust relationship with banks after the crash, you look more at the way in which regulation has changed. Banks had to drive down their cost base, and other financial providers saw that opportunity to offer a lower cost service. And it became much easier to sign up to something like a payment service provider app than to get a bank account in a lot of cases. And there was a lot of people, and there still are a lot of people, that are unbanked. And effectively, looking at apps and fintech, that's really broadened the appeal and the availability of financial services to a lot of people. And I think that's been a really important part of what we're seeing in the fintech revolution.
Okay, so kind of taking that a bit further forward, Ferran, if I could ask you a question. A lot of these technologies, a lot of these apps aren't from here. They're from other places in the world. It's kind of become very globalized. Do you see that global ecosystem, it leads to an inevitability that financial services are destined to be provided from elsewhere and not on the Isle of Man? And bear in mind, there are two bankers here, so we might not like the answer you come up with.
Okay, I'll try my best then. Thank you, Kurt. So, obviously, you've been talking about disruption and getting all of these financial services from elsewhere? The short answer is yes, unfortunately for Steve. But at the same time, it's not just an unfortunate thing, it's just an opportunity. Because at the same time that there will be financial services offered from elsewhere, there is an opportunity for the island to attract talent and to attract investment in a way that this gets built in here and we can service more broader than just the Isle of Man. However, there are different challenges that come with that, and as obviously Cord has already mentioned, Steve has covered some of them this morning. These challenges come around to different areas, but if we focus in the first one about upskilling our workforce, it's like, do we have here on island all the talent and all the skills just to build a bank, as Capital has done recently with the digital banking, or just to provide payment service providers? We've seen more now creating stable coins, which are based on blockchain, as Steve was mentioning this morning. We have seen all of these coming, so where are we going to get these skills? About a year ago, so if we go back to 2020, September, Paul Jones, one of my colleagues, partner colleague in the office, and myself, we issued a report about upskilling the Isle of Man. The financial services represent more than 30% of the GDP on island, which effectively means about 16,000 people employed. This is a big number. Therefore, the industry and the island needs to do something about it. If we think about opportunities for the Isle of Man, it's like, how can we take all of that? We've seen the Isle of Man receiving four consecutive times during the last 5 years, like Center of Excellence for Financial Services. This means that the island has a marketing there and has an opportunity to sell the island as a big center of excellence for attracting the finance industry. So if we put all of these two things together, and then I'll just pass into maybe Bettina, and she'll have something to say, but there is the regulation aspect. Obviously, there is the FSA, that I believe there is a challenge as well for the FSA, in a sense that what has been regulated in the past, it's been, as Kurt was saying, it's been a bank with a website. What's coming is more a platform. Is like, what is the FSA going to do to, not just to regulate the business as such, it's just a platform that is sitting behind, because these businesses, what they need is trust. So we as ultimate users and the companies will need to trust these businesses to provide the service, and that's where I believe the FSA has a big role to play.
Okay, that leads nicely on to talking to Bettina. So what we're seeing here is a lot more challenges in kind of performing the role of consumer protection, because these things are new, they're complex, they're potentially diverse. Do you see that as a real challenge for the FSA and regulators in general?
Thank you, Kurt. We operate in a very dynamic industry, and we do have to remain agile to keep current in this changing landscape. We have witnessed, and we just talked about that, the significant importance of these fintech developments in recent years. And certainly in the Isle of Man, we're very much alive to the prospect of these new opportunities that present themselves, as Farron was just mentioning. Our focus is, as a risk-based supervisor, that we need to strike the right balance. So really between encouraging innovation, but at the same time making sure that there's appropriate compliance and consumer protection. The engagement that the authority has with, for example, the Department for Enterprise and the private sector is key in terms of making sure that we can harness those opportunities that will present themselves. We have worked well together in the past, but we will renew that collaboration, and we're actually coming up with a new exciting venture together. We will be supporting digital and finance agencies in launching an innovation challenge in 2022. So we're very excited to harness, and we talked about maybe some offshore, but certainly a lot of the island's talents in terms of helping on this new venture. So the intention for this innovation challenge is really to invite creative, sustainable, technology-based solutions to a current statement that we'll make, a current issue that we face. and then help that winning applicant to get that proposition to market. This journey, and I think that relates a little bit to what Farron was saying, will involve the use of our regulatory sandbox. So we're in a live environment, but quite safe in the sense that we'll have research and development that will be tailored to that solution, and that will also reduce some of the risk to consumers. So that ties in to our strategic plan, and you might have seen that we just released that on Tuesday. So that is one of our long-term goals, to really make sure that we support innovation, and ties, quite nicely also to the Islands plan in terms of having a sustainable and vibrant and secure future. And maybe if I can end on just what are we trying to achieve with the Innovation Challenge. It is really to assist the Isle of Man to be a resilient jurisdiction that really builds on the foundation that we have in a strong financial services industry, and enables innovation to really make us future-proof, and then also, give us the expansion in terms of opportunities. I'll stop there.
Okay, that's a really positive development, and fairly new. Certainly I hadn't heard about it before that. So is that a real indication of things we talked about, that collaboration between the agencies and the regulators to kind of drive the island forward?
So yes, that's what it is. And the holistic approach will really serve as well, so that as I said, industry will help us in terms of looking for example, that issue that we want to try to solve in terms of that innovation. Again, the agencies will, work hard in pulling that all together. And then, as I said, from the regulatory perspective, we have that sandbox, and we will work with applicants to see how they fit into the regulatory spectrum. To your point, Farron, in terms of a platform, what is it? For example, does it actually need to be regulated? All of that.
Okay, I think I'm going to claim that for the panel as an exclusive that we released here. So you heard it here first, guys.
Sorry, Kurt, just on that point, I wonder whether it's maybe looking to take that a step further again. So, collaboration between regulator and the agencies, but we've really got to look at starting to bring the industry in as well. As a member of the industry, we may have very specific areas that we're focusing on. We may have the resources to do that. It's something that we very much want to drive. So it's likely that we might have that information to then feed into that collaboration to say, this stuff is available. How can we then maybe bring that into regulation to use that kind of fintech software better? So yeah, very much the earlier we can collaborate at the industry level before these kind of developments come through and out the other end, I think would be massively beneficial as well.
Do you think in doing that, just as a kind of follow-on question, if we're looking at financial services and we're saying they're dispersing into various things, is it going to become more challenging defining what the industry is that you're consulting, because it may span a number of ones? And we have, at the moment, financial services is kind of very formal in having things like bankers associations, etc. So who do you talk to, do you think, as an opinion?
Yeah, exactly, and that's a good point. I think, in those silos, it's maybe not the best way to do it. There's a huge number of pieces of sort of software kit out there that cover every one of those regulated industries. So, your bank's looking at it versus insurance looking at it. It's not a great use of our time, really. So, where we can identify those that are commonplace across those, it would be a lot better to join those things up. So, one industry forum with regulator and agency looking at regulatory innovation and fintech innovation would be very good.
Okay. So sticking with you again, Steve, you're kind of hogging the floor here. We're going to ask you about your own experience, or the experience of the business. So Capital International have created a digital bank from scratch. And really, it'd be interesting to learn the challenges of putting all of those pieces together. given that those have to come from various places. Can you give us a bit of insight into that?
Yeah, so I'll caveat it that when I joined Capital 3 years ago, I didn't know what an API was. So it was very hard to figure these things out. But quickly you kind of understand, okay, there's the connections and you can make these things happen. As far as sort of connecting building a new bank, connecting that up to all these networks, there were sort of more modern technologies that you had to connect to, which were somehow easier, through API because they're already at that level. I say easier. We have an in-house team of developers that make it easy, and it's not easy for me. But then there's still the core. From a banking perspective, you've still got quite antiquated file transfer processes. That's really how all the large, correspondent clearing banks in the UK still work over the SWIFT networks. You've got these files transferring every so many minutes. It's quite an old-fashioned way of doing it. But we've been speaking to the clearers recently, and they're very much on a drive now to move away from that. There is a push for ISO 20022. It's a new sort of financial data standard, which I would encourage everyone to start looking at. We will have standardized data that then will allow banks to transact via API direct with clearing banks. That's the direction that the UK is going. It's being mandated by UK regulator and the Bank of England. So we will start to see potentially a shift away from those old antiquated connections into a more faster API. And
Okay.
I'll talk about blockchain later.
If I could put you on the spot, out of all of those things you used to construct your bank, how many of those were available here, and how many did you acquire from elsewhere? So how much localism could be applied to that? Was it possible to do?
I'd say from a systems and connectivity through to, the payment rails, the network, there's very little here in the Isle of Man. Obviously, you're connecting to the UK clearing network in the majority of cases, and you need a primary correspondent bank to get you into the international payments. So that has to come from UK or further afield. But as far as our sort of front-end online banking system, that was actually all in-house developed. There was a big push to get high-quality skill developers in to do that. That's the biggest challenge, I think, is building
Okay.
that.
I think just picking up on something that Steve said there, one thing that he alluded to was the difficulty of interacting with some of the clearers, and having worked over the last sort of 5 to 10 years with a number of PSPs, payment service providers, the traditional banks are making it really difficult for those players. They look for enhanced levels of KYC, they look for compliance reports, and they don't update their systems to work with the sort of interfaces that are being developed today, because I think they see the threat that's coming from the fintech sector, and they're not quite agile enough, or they don't quite have the vision to actually try and compete and make their offering comparable.
On that exact point, we met with our clearer yesterday, and it's the first time I'd sort of heard that they're finally building a new payment system. They are moving away from their old ones. They know that they are unable to keep up with this change, and they will be left behind if they don't. So the start of that is, they're moving faster payments onto API. They're asking us to do that now. That mechanism is there. But they had to build a new system to do that, because their old ones are just so archaic they can't do it. But there does seem to be the push to do it now. So it's good to see.
Okay, so if I could ask a generic question and kind of go down the panel. So what does the panel feel are the threats that face the Isle of Man from fintech, from diversification? And what do we need to do to react to that, and how quickly? So start with you, Russell.
Okay, well, I think the Isle of Man still has a lot of people employed in traditional finance, and making sure that we don't, as an economy, lose those jobs is very important, and it's making sure that we are welcoming and very sort of open to having fintech businesses locate here. And it's really refreshing to hear what Bettina said about the FSA approach. I think if you go back 5 years, certainly I heard a lot of stories about people getting a license for payment service providers through the FCA much more quickly and seamlessly than trying to get an Isle of Man FSA license. But it's been really good to hear just today, actually, there's a couple of people that have recently got e-money licenses locally, and that's fantastic. And, you know, with Capital getting their license as well, I think it shows that commitment to innovation that I think we'll need to show as an island and have both the agencies and the regulator playing their part in that together.
I would say just to add a bit different and maybe thinking about what's coming and not what's already here. If we think about what's coming, is we've heard about digital coins, we've been talking about crypto. I think this is a new disruptive element that is coming. And rather than maybe be thinking what's out there, we should be thinking what is it really coming and where can we really lead in what's coming. This would be for me my main thinking and contribution for the island. And when you think about banking as it's been until now, I think there are so many elements that the bank has been providing for many, many years that today any of us can get from new technology use, like you were mentioning, Russell, the payment service providers, but some of them are already old because you can already transfer money, as Steve was talking before, with peer-to-peer, so one-to-one. We can all have crypto. Crypto can be used as a payment service. We also have seen now the issuance of stable coins. How many of us can have stable coins and transfer the stable coins straight away from one to another without using the bank at all? The next phase, and what a lot of countries are talking, and maybe Europe now is left behind, and some of the G7, is the central bank for digital coins. With central bank, how much is going to disrupt that all the banking industry? Is like the traditional money might disappear and it will go into a digital coin. Do we need a bank for holding a digital coin? No, we don't. So that's where we start to think in a different way, and I can see Steve already jumping onto me, so maybe.
I think we'll see an interesting convergence of, I think, banks will become crypto companies or cryptos will become banks. One way or the other, there'll be a convergence.
I would agree with you, Steve. It's just what the banks have been doing until now. They have to refresh themselves, and we can pick up in your point, Russell, when you were saying we've seen the banks doing many, many things. It's just these people will have to upskill themselves. They will have to reskill themselves, learn new things, and maybe convert into a new model banking, which won't be the traditional banking, will be the central banks issuing the digital coins. Do the central banks want to become commercial banks? Maybe not. They just want to issue them, and then we'll need the banks to perform something different.
And Russell, you just wanted to add to that?
I think it'll be important to see. We've heard the SEC are going to look at regulating in some form or other stablecoins. And it'll be interesting to see how that industry interfaces with the SEC so as not to get bogged down, if you like the traditional banking industry has got with the SEC as a prime example of their regulatory style. Other regulators maybe have a more pragmatic and easier style to work with, I think it's fair to say. But, you know, that could really slow down the sort of evolution of stablecoin as a payment system if the SEC really get their hands on it.
Bettina?
So no, all good points. I think from the authorities' perspective, and I think Kurt, you had touched on it. You know, for the Isle of Man, for us being a small jurisdiction, what is it that makes sense for us? I think it would be very dangerous to want to be all things to all people and really divide and try too many initiatives versus saying what brings economic activity, what has jobs and can bring additional jobs to the economy, and then really focus on those sectors. It's easy to be getting carried away with, you know, and we can all discuss crypto and what maybe we want to do with that, but I think it is important to be very mindful in terms of what do we see as really bringing economic activity and, again, future-proof our existing banking sector and the financial services sector more generally. So that is something I think we got to be very mindful about versus just doing or trying to do too much too quickly.
So we really need to lay out our strategy for this and look how that best fits the Isle of Man. Steve?
I think that's a great point. And you know, there are industries already here that we've established as a sector But as was went through a number of times, I think on the left-hand side, the challenge side of the opening address, local banking is still not there for those industries. So that focus on, well, what have we got? How do we actually get to a point where the local banks can serve those industries? That's a big challenge. At the moment, I think there's maybe a slight misconception that's our local appetite that says, no, we can't do crypto, or no, we can't do e-gaming or whatever. It's not our appetite. We're very, very open to looking in those things and have done a lot of work to understand them. It's the correspondent bank that we go through. It's their appetite. They make the decision. And even then, it's actually another leg removed. So if it's US dollars, our UK correspondent clears through US clearer. They say no. So it's what we've been trying to do is sort of encourage, both from a NatWest perspective and through some of the roundtables we've had, I think we need to get, as a jurisdiction, going to the NatWest of the world, the Barclays, getting to the right people who make the decisions at the regulatory level there, and display why we, as a jurisdiction, are strong in that industry sector.
So the kind of infrastructure, the whole ecosystem,
Yes.
you need to think from end to end.
Me going there purely as Capital International Bank, as a brand new bank, asking them to change their entire appetite just for
Yes.
something I would be after is not necessarily going to work.
So we've got a minute and a half, and we've got 2 questions, so we'll try and answer them very quickly. First question is, which technology available today will change banking in the future? Now, personally, I'd say you've got to define what banking means first in the future, which I think will be substantially different. Any other opinions to offer in there?
Blockchain.
Blockchain.
It will just be, we will transact via blockchain, in my view. We mentioned there about not hampering it with regulation, but it will need to be regulated if you're storing value in digital central bank currency. What stops the next digital financial crisis if there's not equivalent banking regulations around it?
Okay, and unfortunately, Steve, as you picked that one up, the next one is actually specifically for you, which was, has Capital International taken advantage of the technology that is used in the e-gaming sector to make its processes faster and improve its decision-making capability?
I'd say less so. In some areas, maybe on the kind of AML, CFT kind of sides of it, transaction monitoring elements, there's certainly pieces of software and technology that we use that probably mirror a lot that's used in the e-gaming sector. But then I think the e-gaming sector are able to make payments much faster because they have a multitude of avenues that they're able to make them through, whereas banks are largely forced down the traditional clearing mechanisms and SWIFT networks. So a bit of a combination, really.
Okay, well, I have a flashing counter light in front of me here, which means we've reached the end of our time and we can let you go off and have something to eat. But thank you very much to the panel, and thank you very much for listening.